You want to get dead? This is how you get dead. I'm going to replace this single pot suicide cylinder with a more modern dual pot master cylinder for the minimal amount of work possible. Stick around. Real quick guys, before we get started, this one took a while to get out. This footage is all actually several months old. At the end of this video, you'll see my little black dog Catfish, who often goes on our test drives with us. Right after this was filmed, she got really sick really fast and we lost her. So this was just a hard one to get through. You know, she was a big part of our lives, so much so that the channel was named after her. And she loved cars so much, I'd put her up there on a Mount Rushmore beside Mickey Thompson of all-time hot rodder. If it had wheels and an engine, she wanted in it and couldn't wait to go. Didn't matter what it was. I think I'm gonna do some charity stickers and donate any proceeds to the local rescue we got her from, so be on the lookout for that soon. But hey, no more being somber. This one's for the fish. We miss you every day. Let's upgrade our brakes. I'm Jeremy, welcome back to Catfish Motorsports. Today we're back on my 1962 Catalina Safari and we're going to be working on brakes. Now, this car actually has a pretty fully functioning brake system, but on this old girl, the power brake booster leaks. When you're inside, you can hear it hissing, and there's just not a whole lot you can do about that when replacing the unit. Unfortunately, for this old 62 Catalina, the original factory style brake boosters are pretty much unobtainium. You just can't get them. So we're going to do a little bit of cobbling and see if we can't make something else that's readily available off the shelf work. And I'm not going to replace that power booster without going ahead and replacing the master cylinder too, because it's got one of those old school single pot master cylinders in it that are just death machines if something bad happens. We're going to upgrade to a slightly more modern dual pot master cylinder. I'll go over all the part numbers and stuff as we get to them, so if you want to try and match what I'm doing here, you can. A lot of you guys, if you were doing a similar job, you'd probably be working from a kit, usually like a front disc brake kit, and that's great. Problem is, for this car, again, much like some of the factory parts, there's not a lot of options. Currently, nobody has a disc brake kit in stock that I want. They're all back ordered. The only one that's available is an eBay kit, which doesn't look terrible. The problem is it moves the wheels a full 5/8 of an inch out, and I don't want to lose that clearance to the inner fender, so I'm not going to install that. So we're going to do what we can with pieced together parts, and I'm pretty confident this is going to work. I'll tell you why. Some of you may be familiar with the name Scarebird. Scarebird Brakes for a long time has sold disc brake kits pretty affordably using factory parts and their own homemade adapter units. Now, the original Scarebird actually recently retired and sold his site off, so it is still up and functioning. It's just not the original guy anymore. That guy, however, is a big Pontiac person. So he's pretty readily available on the Pontiac sites, and I spoke to him personally. He helped me spec this out. So this isn't just me. This is coming from a professional. So I have pretty high confidence this is going to work. But there are going to be a few pitfalls along the way. I'm sure I'll probably have to take a run to the parts store at some point to get something I don't have. That's just kind of standard. Even when you buy a kit, a lot of times you'll find that you do still need something. Brake line, adapter fitting, flare fitting, etc. Let's start by looking at what we got here. Now, we clearly have our original style single pot master cylinder, and they work great when they're functioning. There's nothing wrong with them. A lot of you guys have probably driven them around. I have driven them around. I had a 64 Galaxy that I drove for years that had one. It's fine. The problem is if something goes wrong, you lose a brake line or something, you've got no backup at that point, and bad things happen, especially because a lot of these old cars don't have functioning emergency brakes. Mine doesn't. Yours probably doesn't either. You know, even if you have a manual transmission, you're probably the guy that just puts it in gear when you park it. And I know you animals, because I am you animals. I know that if you get an old car and you get lucky enough that the brake system works, you probably don't go through and check every single brake line and make sure there's no weak point or flat out replace the brake lines. You probably just count your lucky stars that your brakes work and you move on to picking out a new camshaft for it. I get it. I do the same thing sometimes. That's why it's actually important to do this upgrade, because if you have an old brake line fail on you, you know, you'll still have your front or your back brakes, hopefully your front brakes, and you probably won't die. This is a pretty affordable upgrade, especially, like I said, if you do it with a disc brake kit. It's probably going to come with a dual pot master cylinder anyway. This is just a no-brainer, guys, especially if you're doing something like this where you're making a repair anyway. There is no chance I would go through the trouble of pulling this booster out without replacing that master cylinder. Now, as you can see here, this is clearly not a 1962 factory unit, as evidenced by this electrical plug that shouldn't be there. And one of the problems is the firewall on these like pre-64-ish cars, something like that, GM cars, they've got a different bolt pattern. So pretty much none of the later model boosters will bolt in. Now, because this is clearly later model, I'm curious when I get back there if I find out that the firewall has already had holes extended already. So I might have to get out the Dremel. I might find out that somebody else has already done it, or I might find out that they happen to find some sort of weird booster that did happen to fit this old school firewall. Let's find out. Of course, the battery's dead. I think my body emits some sort of radiation which just reacts poorly with lead acid batteries and kills them. Jump started the car. We're down here. I've got you close to the booster, but I really don't think you're gonna be able to hear it because I can barely hear it. Sometimes it's louder than others, just kind of depends on how hot things are, you know, heat, expansion, etc. Either way, I swear it's leaking. Now, before we get started tearing things apart, I'm gonna give away the whole shooting match right here. So you don't even have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. I would appreciate if you continued to watch the video. And if you're new, please like and subscribe. But I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do the whole thing right here because it's really easy. There's a single line that comes out of the single pot master cylinder. If you look down, pretty much every car is gonna have a small distribution block. There's one line that goes in, there's two lines that come out to your front brakes, and there's a single line that goes back to your back brakes. So, assuming this is gone and you now have your dual pot master cylinder in here, you're gonna unscrew the line from your distribution block that goes to your rear brakes. So your rear brakes are gonna be plugged directly into this rear reservoir, and that's it. You're then going to plug the hole in the block that went to your rear brakes. After that, this same line that would have come from your single pot master cylinder, you're going to run that to your front reservoir. So now this is going to go to the distribution block, which distributes to the front brakes, and your rear brakes are going to be plugged directly into this. That's it. Now you can do more with an adjustable proportioning valve or a combo valve. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it will work very simply just like this. It's that easy.
Here's the parts list. This is all I used minus some line and fittings. You may or may not need the rod extension kit and push rod adapter, so you might be able to shave off like 30 bucks right there. This Dorman master cylinder has a 1 1/8 inch bore. It's for a lot of things, but most notably it's for like a square body C10 with power brakes. So you don't have to buy the Dorman brand. You can find any square body with power brake master cylinder. It'll be the same thing. If you don't have power brakes, you would want to find one that has a 1 or a 15/16 inch bore.
Okay, let's also talk about some of the problems I'm gonna have with this specific car. Now, as you can see, this is an Olds motor, which shouldn't be in here. I hate it. I wish it wasn't in here. We'll deal with that at a later date. But if this was a Pontiac, the dipstick would be on the other side. This dipstick is probably going to come right where that new longer dual pot master cylinder wants to sit. So we're probably going to have to try and get cute and bend this whole thing up or something. That might be easy. That might be really hard. We'll find out. The other issue is this wheel well was just not designed for that side exit master cylinder. So much so that some other people who've done this have gone with a certain year of Cadillac master cylinder, which has lines that exit on the inside, which is kind of odd, but there are a few cars that have it. So I'll see if I can find that part number for you. So if you were doing a car like this, where you don't have a lot of room to bend lines down, you could try that. I'm just gonna try to bend them down because other people have done it successfully, so no, it will work. For now, let's start taking things apart. The first thing I'm gonna do is disconnect the battery, because as you can see, there's a big junction right here, and I don't wanna be pulling wrenches into something and ground myself out right there and hurt myself or hurt the car. So, disconnect this, and let's get started. Oh, we are pretty much certainly gonna make some level of mess here, but I'm gonna try and limit it. Start by removing this vacuum line, and I'm probably gonna fast forward through some of this and let you guys cue the music and watch fast motion, and then I'll stop as I come to interesting things. I'm trying to decide if I'm just going to remove this line and try to take the whole thing off but disconnect it on the inside, or if I'm going to remove this because I kind of want to see what the push rod situation looks like. This thing might be metric. Boy, that would be weird. But given that this is kind of a strange brake booster with this plug on it, maybe it is metric. Yeah, boy, that sure feels metric. Yeah, that's a 15 millimeter for sure. Wow. All right. First interesting discovery. So before I do that, I'm gonna see if I can't get this brake line off. These don't look bad, but it's probably still been in there for a long time. These brake lines have pretty much certainly been replaced at some point. They're just in too good a shape to have not been. If you don't have a set of these flare nut wrenches, you should consider getting some. These are just from Harbor Freight. You know, I probably paid $8 for them on sale, and they're super handy to have. They grab a larger area of your tube nut than a normal wrench would. So when you're dealing with these super old lines that have probably already been partially stripped out, these are really nice to have. And this is exactly what I was talking about. You know, that would have caused sparks there, so pay attention to things like that. Don't hurt yourself. Disconnect the battery. All right, now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and remove this master cylinder. Now, I do think that I could just go in and remove the whole thing from inside by disconnecting the brake booster, but I want to see what this looks like in here, so I'm just going to take this off here. So this has a deep, I can't remember what they call it, deep hole? That doesn't sound right. Sounds vaguely erotic. Deep bore. This has a deep bore master cylinder. The one that I'm replacing it with doesn't. I can also see down here that the rod that they have for it looks like just a piece of all thread that somebody kind of took a grinder to the tip of to make it work. So hopefully we don't have to resort to the same tactics. I bought a new rod kit, but we'll see. All right, so we're transitioning to inside the car so we can remove the brake booster, and kind of made another interesting discovery. I should have noticed this before because I've had this car for like 8 months and never noticed this, but it's already partially loose. So if we look in here, we can see that 2 of the 4 nuts are completely down. That one's down, the one up top's down. But if you look at this guy up here, it's back pretty much all the way off. And so is that one over there. So that's awesome. I wonder why they would only put 2 down. 2's probably plenty, but why would you do that? Well, there's no turning back now. Now, I'm not quite sure at this point if that has been elongated or not. It actually looks like it is. If you look down here at the bottom hole, that... Turn on the light here. If we look down here at this bottom hole, that looks like it's been oblong just a little bit. And like these actually look like maybe they were just drilled larger instead of oblonged. So, remains to be seen whether our new booster will fit or not. I am going to measure both of the bolt patterns just to kind of see where they're at. But for the most part, we're just going to stab that new one in, or try to stab it in and see what it takes to make it work. Here's our old booster. This bad boy had 3 distinctly different types of nuts on it. I don't even know if they were all the same thread pattern, which is maybe why some of them were just on the ends and weren't all the way installed. Well, let's unbox this new boy. So this, as evidenced by the sticker right here, is a Tough Stuff Performance brake booster. Now this is, if I remember correctly, the like standard hot rod kit, so it's not actually made for any particular make or model. Scarebird told me that these Tough Stuff boosters are based on like 80s S10 boosters. They're a 9-inch dual diaphragm. Now, you might be tempted to go smaller with like a 7 or an 8-inch dual diaphragm, but if you take a look around, you'll find that those things have absolutely terrible reviews. I honestly think the only people that are happy with them are people that don't drive their cars. So, you know, it just doesn't matter because you're just driving it from, you know, the trailer to the show or whatever, and that was what fit, and it's shiny. Or people whose brakes were so awful, they don't even know what good brakes feel like. So this is your compromise between going with a full like 11 or even 13-inch booster, which is what that is. I believe that's an 11, and that's a single diaphragm. So this is a 9-inch dual diaphragm, so it's going to provide a little bit more boost than a 9-inch single diaphragm would, but it's going to be a little bit smaller, give us a little more room in there, which is always good. More room in the engine bay. Put in a bigger engine, better. Now this says it comes with a rod kit. I ordered this stuff months ago, so I barely remember what's in it. I also bought, as part of this, a generic rod kit made by Summit Racing. And somewhere, I bought this kind of bullet style adapter. What this is for is, remember how I said that this was a long bore? Now this is a short bore, so it ends up I probably won't need this, but I wasn't sure what this booster was going to come, I wasn't sure what this master cylinder was going to come with. So I ordered this just in case I had a rod kit set up for a short bore and needed this. This will adapt you. So I mean, I could send this back. Chances are I'm just going to throw this on the shelf because it might come in handy down the line. But I kind of overbought stuff here. I knew that I was going to have more than I needed, but I didn't want to get stuck and have to order parts and wait for it once I got started. So ordered some extra stuff, probably won't need, but better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Open this bad boy up. This does have a rod kit on the end, so there we go. There's our warranty card. And a free offer for a hat if you send it in. That's nice. Yeah, so horizontally, these are about 3 3/8, something like that. And vertically, they're 3 1/2. And I think the original bolt pattern on these was 3 3/8 or 3 1/2, probably 3 3/8 square all the way around. I'll try to find that out for you guys because I can't remember for sure. But one way or the other, you don't have to oblong very much. I know nobody likes to, you know, hack on their old firewalls, but they don't have to. But it's going to be covered up anyway. It's not that big a deal if you have to do that. You can also see our size difference here, the 9 versus the 11. And it's pretty dramatic. And the 9-inch with the dual diaphragm is a little bit longer, but not that much. Maybe an inch, inch and a half, maybe not even that. I'm sorry, maybe an inch or a half inch, definitely not an inch and a half longer. And we don't have that ugly plug on this one, so a win. Well, that was a fun break, unboxing this and looking at our shiny new toy. But now we need to jump back in here and start doing some of the less fun work, which is going to be bending these brake lines and generally making that fit. We're going to replace a couple of the rubber lines that are in here, which you should do pretty much anytime you get an old car that hasn't had those lines changed in a long time, because a lot of times they're hard, want to leak, or even if they're not leaking, they have constricted on the inside to where they're restricting flow. I hate bleeding brakes, so since I'm going to have to bleed here anyway, I'm going to do all that stuff now so I don't have to do it again later. So with our booster out of the way, this is still kind of hard to show, but I'm going to show you what I can. If we look down here, here's our distribution block. Now you can see we've got the line that we removed from our master cylinder, goes down here and connects back here on the side. Again, hard to see, I apologize. And then at the front, we have one line here that goes to the passenger brake, and then we've got this boy here that goes to the driver brake. In the back, we can see our line that goes directly to the back of that distribution block. So this is the one we're going to disconnect, and we're going to bend this line up a little bit. Then we can work on, once we get our new master cylinder in here, we can bend the line as easily as possible down to that. I do have a short pre-made one that hopefully I can just bend, but somewhere around here I've got a flare kit too, so if we have to make a line, we'll do that. It's not that big a deal. I'm just gonna have to walk around for 30 minutes cussing because I can't remember where I put it. I'll show you a trick real quick. I did a short on this a while ago, but worth showing again. These are all 1/4 inch brake lines, and you know, if you see these a lot, you know, you probably recognize that anyway. But if you're not sure, or if you're working and it's rusty, it's dark, you're upside down, it's kind of hard to tell, all you got to do is grab a wrench and put it around the outside, and that'll tell you how big it is. So you could grab a 3/16 wrench and it would not go over this. Whereas we grab this 1/4 inch wrench, slides over the line, it's not rattling around, that's your size right there. So if you're not sure what size your hard line is, just grab a few wrenches and slide them over till you find the one that fits. And then that's your size. I am unsure if that just broke loose or stripped. I think it broke. Going to turn off the camera briefly because I'm about to lose my composure. Yeah. Okay, so some time has passed. I actually managed to come out and get this line loose. So what the problem was, and this happens a lot, is I broke this loose out of the distribution block, but the line itself was sort of corrosion welded to the tube nut, and it was trying to spin with it. And sometimes it'll be so bad that it'll just break off, but in this case I got enough penetrating fluid in there to get it to come loose, and now we're good. And this line seems to be in pretty good shape, so I think I'm going to be able to bend it upwards and not have to replace this line right now, and then we'll just keep an eye on it. So anytime you're doing a job with fluids where you're concerned there might be leaks when you first kind of engage the system, it's a good idea to try and clean the area where you can, because if it's wet and nasty before, you're not going to know if it's a new leak or if it's stuff there already. So I think now we're at the point I'm going to try to stab this bad boy in here and see what kind of clearance issues I'm going to have with that dipstick, and just make sure it actually goes into the firewall. I don't have to enlarge the holes or anything, which we still might have to do. But let's throw this in there and see what happens. Right, so I think it's going to go like that. Slid right home, no problem. Ooh, this is going to be tight. I'm going to go inside and throw in 1 or 2 of these nuts just so it sits in, and then we'll come back out and play with the master cylinder. Okay, well, we are sort of in there. We already got problems. Looks pretty good out here. Obviously this is going to be an issue, and then I'm concerned about how tight of a bend I'm going to have to make here, which I kind of knew was going to be a problem going in that others had reported. The bobtail on the back of this is already a little bit too long too, so I'm not sure if I can thread that in more or if I'm going to actually have to cut that off. We'll see. But yeah, we knew this wasn't going to be quite a bolt-in journey, so sort of expected. Still a little bit of a bummer. You always hope things go easily. Let's try to throw this on and see how bad it's going to be. This is questionable. Well, that bolt pattern doesn't seem quite right. There's no way that's not right, is there? It's interesting that this doesn't want to go. It is just barely not fitting, which this seems like maybe a new body So, you know, sometimes with that stuff, if this is an offshore case that's not like remanufactured Delco Remy or something, that you would need to massage it slightly. Okay, we gave her just the very smallest of haircuts through that hole with a 7/16 drill bit, and now she slides on there. It's tight, but it goes on. This is actually not quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. Obviously, the dipstick is going to interfere, so I'm going to try to bend that just a little up so it hugs the block a little bit closer. Shouldn't be too bad. And these are going to require, you know, a pretty hard 90 coming down, but I kind of knew that. Could be a little bit sketchy trying to get that tight of a bend without, you know, kinking that line, but we'll just do the best we can there. And then obviously this isn't all the way in. I'm gonna have to pull the whole thing back out again because I gotta figure out what to do about the bobtail on the back so I can actually connect it to the brake pedal. Well, I fought the good fight and it just wasn't gonna work as is. I am gonna have to shorten this a little bit. I did try to twist it too to see if it got shorter just by threading in some, but it does not appear that it does. So, not the end of the world. Is not gonna be the first time that I've had to shorten a bolt. One pro tip though, when you're gonna do this, if you find yourself having to shorten a bolt, take a nut. In this case, this is actually a thread cutter, like a thread chaser nut, so that's even better if you have a set of those. But thread a nut down past where you want to cut. That way, after you make your cut, you can come back up, and it should clean the threads as you come up. Because you might find yourself, if you don't cut it just right, in a situation where you can't get something to thread on top. So this should help alleviate that situation. All right, that took a lot of finagling, but it all appears to have worked. We're in. I might pull it out one more time and try to throw this rubber gasket that was on the back, so we're not metal to metal on the back there, just because I feel like that might squeak. But everything works at this point. So now I'm gonna throw the master cylinder on there and start looking at bending some stuff up. All right, we're pretty well done for the day. I'm gonna do a couple more things. Probably gonna pull the whole assembly out one more time and then put that little piece of rubber gasket in between the firewall and the brake booster. I'll show you what I did in here. And real quick, I just wanted to show you something I did to make it easier on myself. I had some steel brake line laying around. It's good, no problem. But when you have to make a really, really tight bend, it's tough on your fingers, you know, or, you know, whatever tool. 'Cause most of your tools are not gonna be able to get you a super tight one. So what I did is I cheated. I went to a local parts store and got some Nycop brake line, which is nickel copper, and it bends quite a bit easier. It's still tough if you got to get in there and bend one at a super sharp radius, but you'll have a much easier time than you would with a standard steel line, or especially like if you're trying to use stainless. They're really tough to bend. All right, the last thing I'm going to do tonight is get in here and change this dude. This is the front left brake, front driver brake. I already did the other side when I got it. Now, a lot of people tend to think that when you have a brake that's pulling from one side to the other, that your brakes are out of adjustment. You know, if you press the brake and the car pulls hard to the left, you think, oh, well, the right brake's out of adjustment, which is a possibility. But very often with old cars, what has actually happened is one of your rubber brake lines that goes to one of your wheels is collapsed and is essentially not letting any fluid through. So it's always a good idea to change those. Those are failure points, especially if they haven't been changed in 20, 30 years. Hi, it's me from the future. Job's done. Spoiler alert, it works out. I just wanted to go over real quick the tools that I use to do this. You will not necessarily need all of this stuff, but everything I'm going to show you at some point during this job, I used it. You might not need all of them. If you have brake lines that are particularly rough, you might even need an extra trick or two up your sleeve. But for the most part, if you have this stuff here, you're going to be able to get pretty much any job done on your brake lines. First, easy and cheap, a set of flare wrenches. I showed these a little bit earlier. These are just going to give you more bite on a tube nut than a traditional wrench will, because it grabs pretty much all the way around except for one flat on a hex. Flare nuts strip really, really easily, and then you're, you know, trying to get vice grips on them and stuff like that. Just start with these. This is a different flavor of the same thing. These are flare crow's feet. The benefit to these is, you know, you put them on a ratchet with a long handle, and it just gives you a little bit more mechanical advantage than one of these will, just a short little wrench. There were a couple of spots in this job where they were on there really good, and I used these just to break it loose and then switched over to a traditional wrench. No matter if you have a kit or if you're doing a full custom job, kind of like I was, you almost certainly are going to find yourself needing to replace a line somewhere, or join a fitting that doesn't quite match. So there's a good chance that you will need a couple of joints like this. You probably won't know what you're going to need. Maybe you get lucky, and if you have a kit that has everything. I've done a few of these, and I've found that almost invariably I find myself at O'Reilly or Napa getting a section of brake line or a joint like this to make something work. Because there's a good chance you are going to have to do some custom brake lining, you're going to need a tube cutter. I like these little ones like this because you'll find, especially if you're trying to do it in the car, you're just going to have a lot more room with something like this than you would if you used a big cutter like this. And honestly, this thing comes with a lot of flare kits. This thing is trash. Don't just throw this in the garbage. This is just a Harbor Freight little cutter, but it works great. Some sort of bending tool. You don't necessarily have to have one of these. You can bend lines by hand, especially if you use the Nycop line like I showed you guys, that's softer and easier to bend. But this is handy, especially if you're trying to make a bend that's right at the fitting. So like when I made a copy of this line, while I bent this large radius by hand, the sharper bends that are towards the end of the lines, like here and here, I did use the tool for that. Again, Harbor Freight, super cheap, and you can buy a much better one. They make ones that'll bend a radius much tighter than this. So if you think you're going to maybe be doing this every now and again instead of just once, invest in a little bit better tool, because even then you're probably only going to be spending like $60. One thing that I wish I had that I didn't realize, I was looking at brake tools as I was doing this job, Eastwood makes a set that are just pliers that make a really tight radius, and I wish I had a set of those. I've got a set in my cart in Eastwood. I'm actually going to buy some of those for the next time I have to do this. A double flare tool. Now I'm going to make a separate short video about this, but I'll just show you guys in brief. This is the kind of kit, that comes with something like this that you can get. Mine's made by OEM, but you can rent these from O'Reilly's, AutoZone, etc. You can get by with these, but they are terrible. I hate these. I've been meaning to buy one of the nice big ones that go in the vise that like Eastwood again makes. I just haven't found the $200 in the budget, but that's coming at some point. Alternatively, this one's made by Titan Tools, but several companies make a tool like this. This thing is great. It's a single block, and it comes with a double-sided tool. The downside to this type of tool, it's only good for one size of line. So this one's for 3/16. I knew I was going to have to do some 1/4" stuff, so I ordered this one. It just didn't get here in time, so I ended up struggling by with this other type of tool and got the job done. But these work way better, and depending on where you buy it, you can get them for like $40 to $60. Again, the downside is you're gonna have to buy one of these for both 1/4 and 3/16, and as far as I could find, they don't make them for bigger lines. Probably because just with a handheld tool, if you're trying to do 3/8 line, it's probably gonna be too hard for you to do it. Last on that front, this is just a little reamer tool. This is really good for deburring the lines. After you cut it, go in here and deburr it, and you make sure your flare is gonna be better quality. That way you're not gonna have cracks. I don't use it often, but it's really nice to have when I need it. And again, I think I paid $10 for this. I did use my Motive brake bleeder. You don't have to have this, but it is really handy, especially if you work alone. And what I really like about this, as opposed to like a vacuum system or doing with your buddy, you can pressurize from your master cylinder and then really take your time going around the car and checking for leaks, because pretty much anytime you do a brake job, you forget to tighten something. Ask me how I know. Last but not least, some cleaning stuff. This is just some brake clean and some degreaser. Clean the area where you're working. That way you can tell if you have a leak and the grease wasn't just there before. Ooh, and something to catch your brake fluid with when you're bleeding your brakes afterwards. I actually have two kind of pre-made lines over here that are made for going into a combination valve that I'm wondering if I can make work. So here's our booster and master cylinder assembly. We've got the one line. We've got a short jumper here that's going to connect to this. I got to get a union. That's kind of why I'm at a stop today, because I need two unions that I don't have. Got a little bit of a kink here in my tight bend. but I think it'll be fine. Sort of same thing on this one where I had to get a really tight bend to start. And then that one is going to come around. You can see down there where I'm going to connect those two together. I'll head to the parts store in the morning, hopefully get a couple of the unions that I need. We'll jump back into this in daylight. It's a new day and we're gonna get back at it. I'm gonna show you guys kind of where we finished off last night and what we're gonna do today. So as you can see, I've got this rear line now bent straight up, and I've got this one more or less where I need it to be. And I also have couplers on both of these lines. So I bench bled the new master last night. We're gonna throw that in. We're gonna put my little jumpers that I bent on. We're gonna get these bolted in here, and then we're gonna probably change one more line in the back and then start bleeding the brakes. So you're definitely gonna make a little bit of a mess here. If you have a nicer engine bay, you know, you might wanna put something over the loose lines so you don't damage your paint if you can avoid it. Get in there. Yeah, there you go right there. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I dripped a little bit of brake fluid here, and this is actually spray paint right there. Brake fluid is real bad for paint, so be careful. Now I'm not going to tighten this all the way down. This is a little bit of a tip here. Same thing, these hard lines here are in and started, but they're not all the way down. It helps with hard line if you have a little bit of wiggle room everywhere, and then you can tighten it up after you get everything started. This front one is the one that's dripping, so let's try to get that one in first. It's also going to be the easiest to do. Alright, that one started. Now the back, which you're not really going to be able to see, because I can barely see it, which means you can't see it at all. Alright, so I think those are both started. I'm going to tighten these up from the top here. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm not touching anything anywhere. I don't think I am. I'm kind of rubbing on that cable there, but we can fix that. It's also really important when you do these. Now, you can see I kind of have a wacky bend there, which is just kind of what I needed to make. But this line here is Z'd. It was done like that somewhat from the factory. You do not want to have dead straight hard lines because they need room to flex a little bit. So you'll notice if you buy a kit, a lot of times they'll have big spirals in them. They're supposed to have those. That's on purpose. So make sure that your lines, when you bend them, aren't just, you know, straight sections with nowhere to go to flex. Now you definitely want to come in and wipe away anywhere that's been dripping. That way you can tell if you have a leak or not later. Hook this line up, then I'm going to jack the car up and we're going to change the line in the back. So I'm under the car to change this rear soft line, and we have made a discovery. Let's see how well this is going to show up on camera. If you look at that, that appears to be a leak already running down this. That's a problem, and that's why you change these. We got a fresh one here, and I'm going to change it. This one looks like it hasn't been changed in quite a while, so we'll see how much this fights to come out. I got several tools down here which might help us. I'll show them to you if they're necessary. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so that was a bit of a debacle, but we are in there. This line's actually a little too short, but we're just going to live with it for now. I actually need to jack up the rear end a little bit to be able to continue to fully install this. But I believe there's a smashed brake line in the back that we're going to do as our last bit of line work. I'm going to show you that in a second. So we're back here looking at the rear brake lines. This has clearly been replaced. It's not original. Then we get over here. Look at that boy right there. That is smashed pretty much flat. So I'm going to pop that out real quick, and that's going to be the last thing we're going to do. You know, I really was expecting this to be 3/16. Usually rear lines are, but that's quarter. That could be interesting. I don't know if I have one that long. So if you look up here, you can see that they've got this 1/4 inch line running to an adapter that goes in the wheel cylinder. That's probably because these are almost always 3/16 and this is quarter. but I just don't have the energy right now to change all that. So we're just gonna change this 1/4 line and live with it. It's not really gonna make a difference. So here's our old line. I went to my shelf and grabbed a piece of steel line. That's pretty close. I think we can make that work. So I'm gonna go back there, I'm gonna throw this in, I'm gonna finish tightening up that rubber line, and then it's time to bleed. Unless you're Jesse Ventura and Predator, then you ain't got time to bleed. But we have time, so we'll bleed the brakes. All right, it's time to bleed the brakes. So let's talk about a cool piece of kit here. This is a motive power bleeder. I've had this for years. I use it all the time. I have a bunch of different ends for it. It's a really cool piece of kit if you're working by yourself. Now, you don't have to do this. If you have a buddy, you know, you can just kind of traditionally push the brake pedal down and then bleed the brakes one wheel at a time. No big deal. But I work by myself a lot. This is easier than me going and tracking down somebody to help me. I'm going to tell you a couple pitfalls about these because they're not perfect. One, you need a bunch of different ends for it depending on the type of master cylinder you have. This is kind of the universal GM one that has a front and a back port. These do work better in my opinion if you have one of the types of master cylinders that has a screw-in lid, because then you don't need to do the thing that I'm about to talk about next. You just screw it in and you're done. Here's a major pitfall. When you read reviews on these on Summit or wherever you're gonna buy one from, everybody universally says that the little chain attachments, which you can see these notches here, that's for chains that come with it and you wrap it on the bottom of your master cylinder and tighten it up. Everybody's like, those are terrible, they don't work. I just used a pair of C-clamps and that worked a lot better. And I thought to myself, because I'm generally somebody who thinks that when somebody says it's not working right, they're just not doing it right. The comment section was right on this one, which is probably the only time you're ever gonna hear me say that. But the comment section had it right. The chains that come with these are trash, they don't work, you're gonna make a mess. Just go get a couple of big C-clamps like this. I'll show you what it looks like when it's on, and you're just gonna put one on either side, connect to the bottom of your master cylinder, tighten it down. You're gonna have a lot better time doing it that way than you would trying to do it by the directions with what they give you. I promise, trust me, I went through it. The last pitfall that I wanna talk about, and it relates again to paint and how brake fluid really doesn't like paint. A lot of times these tend to overfill it a little bit, so when you pull it off when you're done, be careful because your master cylinder might be all the way up to the brim and this might drip some as you're coming out. So be very careful as you're removing the lid from your master cylinder and as you're transporting this system out of your engine bay that you don't drip on anything with nice paint on it. But really, it's a pretty simple system. All you're gonna do is I'm gonna open this up. I'm gonna fill some brake fluid up in here. It doesn't have to be a ton. You're gonna put this on with the C-clamps. I'll show you what that looks like. And then you're gonna pressurize this thing. There's a little gauge on the front. I forget what it tells you to go to in the directions. I usually just go to like 10 pounds and that works fine. But what this basically does is it's acting like somebody's holding the pedal down all the time. So as opposed to a vacuum system where you're at each little bleeder with a vacuum gun, this pressurizes from the master cylinder. So it's making it like somebody is holding pressure on the brake pedal. That's it. All right, so we're gonna come in here and just sit this anywhere, but it'll sit comfortably. Just line up your holes. You can see there's 2 holes in here. Make sure they're centered over your master cylinder ports. In this case, because the back one is so small, like you really gotta pay attention there. If you're using one of the like Corvette master cylinders where you have 2 big reservoirs, this matters less. And I feel pretty good about that. And here's where the clamps come in. All right, now we're gonna pressurize this. Now as you're doing this, you do need to watch for leaks because if you over pressurize this, it will come out, or if you don't have a good seal, you'll see that you only get to a couple pounds and it starts pouring out. So just kind of watch it, tighten this up if you have to, and don't go nuts on the pressure. You can see the fluid traveling along. All right, we're a little over 10 there. Look around, don't see any leaks. Now because you're pressurized here, you can get under your car and look at all the stuff that you've done and see if you have any leaks from your fittings. Maybe you forgot to tighten something up. This should show leaks as well because now your system's pressurized. After that, if you're comfortable you don't have any leaks, you're just bleeding like normal. You're gonna go around one tire at a time, starting at the farthest one away from the master cylinder, then the other, then the back, then your passenger, then right here, and you bleed your brakes. Very simple. You kind of want to watch this. Make sure you don't run out of fluid, because that'd be the same thing as running your master cylinder out of fluid when you're bleeding normally. You're going to introduce air into the system. So make sure you don't do that. And then check your gauge, see if you're falling. It should fall a little bit as you bleed each one, but if you don't have any leaks, this should, in theory, stay solid. So pretty much inevitably, I forgot to tighten something. If you look, there's a fitting on the back of the distribution block where I said you had to plug that off, and I finger tightened it in there but forgot to go back and tighten it, which led to this, because it's running down the frame. So now I get to clean that up so I don't drip all over myself. So one last little piece of homemade kit here. This is my handy dandy brake bleeder bottle. This is a Diet Mountain Dew bottle that I've been using for probably 10 years for the same thing. Just hole drilled in the cap, a little bit of hose. Stick this on the end and then loosen your bleeder screw, and then you should be able to watch bubbles travel through this clear. When you don't have bubbles anymore, you're good, you move on to the next wheel. This prevents us from making a big mess. Okay, I'm going to try to show you this here. This is kind of difficult to film. You can see fluid filling the line. Oh, and there comes some bubbles. Wait for those to go away. Yeah, it's spitting good now. When those go away, we tighten it up and we move on to the next wheel. Seems steady now. Now we tighten up and we're done with this wheel. See, this is what I was talking about when I said when you pull that brake bleeder off, you might find your master cylinder is over full. The back's not empty. But so what I'm going to do is I've got a little syringe. I'm going to suck some of this out of the front, put it in the back so I don't make a mess when I try to put the cap on. Hello, future me again. Before we go on our test drive, I want to show you a couple things that I left out that you would probably get if you had some sort of kit. Again, I'm going to show you that this works. You don't necessarily need these things, but if you're buying parts together as a kit, you're probably going to get them, and if you get them, you should use them. So the first and biggest one, this is a combination valve. People think of it as a proportioning valve. That's partially correct. It is a proportioning valve, but it also does a couple of things. And then it has an emergency function here that most of you guys probably don't use, but you should. You plug a wire into it and it tells you when you've had a failure. You probably feel the failure anyway, but still nice to have a warning light of some kind. Especially, you might not notice if your rear brakes had failed. You would only, if your front brakes failed, you're gonna notice that. If your rear brakes failed, you might not notice. This would tell you. I don't have one handy to show you, but the other thing you can do is instead of that, you can just throw a single manual proportioning valve to your rear brakes that's going to allow you to adjust the pressure to your brakes as necessary. The combination valve is going to be easier for most people, and that's all you really need. The big thing is that this would do that I don't currently have right now is if I got into a hardcore emergency stop situation, the rear brakes might lock up on me, where this would hopefully prevent that a little bit from happening. Realistically, on an old car like this with no ABS, if I slam on the brakes, I'm locking up all four wheels anyway. Lastly, this is going to be a niche item. This is a residual pressure valve. This is not really necessary on vehicles where the master cylinder is up on the firewall. What these are really designed for is for older cars where you have the master cylinder down low, like under the floorboard, like on the same level as the brakes. At that point, you probably need a residual pressure valve, especially to any drum brakes. You can buy a kit, I think, that'll come with a 2-pound valve for front discs and a 10-pound, which is what this is for rear drums. I bought this for a different project that I never ended up using. But I'm not going to try to explain the science behind it because I haven't looked it up in a while. But basically, drum brakes want a little bit of residual pressure at all times to function correctly, and that's what this does. Most of you guys, though, who are working on, late 50s and up cars aren't going to need this. Okay, so we backed her out of the garage. She does at least have brakes. Now that we've got her out, I'm gonna clean the floor because I wanna be able to see in the morning if it's been leaking anywhere. Assuming we don't have any leaks, I'll take it for a test drive in the morning and see how it goes. drive after getting our brake system all put back together. The garage floor was nice and dry after we cleaned it, so there was no leaks. No brake fluid leaks anyway. Got my quality control associate out here with me, and the test drive's going well. Now, before I started, when you hit the brakes, this car pulled pretty hard to the left. I was hoping we got rid of that when we fixed that crushed brake line in the back, but it still does pull a little bit left. But you also got to remember that except for, you know, what we've done and just inspections of the lines and replacing the soft lines, this brake system is really worn out. You know, I'm kind of in the middle of trying to decide if I'm going to wait out a disc brake system being available for the front, or if I'm going to try to completely rebuild the drum system. That's kind of why I haven't done it yet, because I thought I might go discs. This is just a tough car to buy parts like that for. There's not a lot of stuff available, and even the replacement drums, they're only available from one vendor, and they don't come with the hubs installed. You have to take it and let somebody press in new studs and the hub, because I don't have a press. So we didn't solve that, but what we did is working just fine. It is operating a lot smoother, because with that vacuum leak and that old busted power booster, the brakes kind of went nothing, everything. And now it applies nice and smooth. The pedal feels great. The brakes, even though they're old and worn out and want to pull to the left a little bit, are still engaging all four wheels. I did check all four wheels when I had it up on the jack stands. So all in all, this was a big success. It looks better. We don't have the vacuum leaks. Now our engine's breathing right. And we got rid of that single pot suicide master cylinder. Now we have, you know, a more modern, safer dual pot master cylinder. And if I switch to discs in the future, it's all set up. You know, maybe I add a combo valve or a variable proportioning valve, and that's it, ready to go. You know, one thing I would like to do is I'd like to do a hard brake check, but I don't want to put my quality control associate through the windshield, so we'll hold off on that. I'll do that by myself some other time. I just want to see how the wheels lock up. I think they'll be fine. You know, I said the combo valves have a built-in delay for the rear brakes, but I think the master cylinders do the same thing on their own. Fun fact, dogs love vent windows. That's gonna do it, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.